Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls her age. While her classmates spent weekends at shopping malls and movie theaters, she could be found at the local shooting range, carefully adjusting the scope on her father's old hunting rifle. The metallic click of the bolt action and the satisfying ring of hitting targets downrange had become her favorite sounds in the world. At 23, Sarah worked as a forest ranger in the rugged mountains of Montana, where her exceptional marksmanship skills had saved her life more than once during encounters with aggressive wildlife. Her colleagues respected her ability to place precise shots that would scare off bears without harming them, a skill that required both courage and incredible accuracy. What they didn't know was that Sarah had been secretly training for something much bigger than wildlife management. Every evening after her ranger duties ended, Sarah would drive to a remote canyon where she had set up her own private shooting range. Using her grandfather's World War II Springfield rifle, she had been steadily increasing her shooting distances, pushing herself to hit targets at ranges that most recreational shooters would consider impossible. Her logbook showed consistent progress from 500 meters to 1,000 meters, then to 1,500 meters, and eventually to distances approaching 2,000 meters. The discipline required for long-range shooting had taught Sarah patience and focus that extended far beyond marksmanship. She had learned to read wind patterns by watching grass movements and feeling air currents on her skin. She could calculate bullet drop and drift in her head, accounting for temperature, humidity, and elevation changes. Most importantly, she had developed the mental strength to remain calm under pressure, a skill that would soon be tested in ways she never imagined. On that fateful Tuesday morning in September, Sarah was at the regional shooting competition held annually in Billings. The event drew marksmen from across the northwestern United States, including military veterans, law enforcement officers, and serious civilian competitors. Sarah had entered the precision rifle category, hoping to test her skills against some of the best shooters in the region. She had arrived early to set up her equipment and familiarize herself with the range conditions. Her rifle, a custom-built precision instrument that had taken her 2 years to afford, was meticulously maintained and perfectly zeroed. She had hand-loaded her ammunition the previous week, weighing each powder charge to the 10th of a grain and selecting only the most uniform bullets from her collection. As Sarah knelt beside her shooting mat, making final adjustments to her rifle scope, she noticed someone watching her from a few positions down the firing line. The observer was a tall, lean man in his 30s, wearing military-style clothing and carrying what appeared to be an expensive precision rifle system. His confidence was evident in the way he moved, and the small crowd that had gathered around his shooting position suggested he was someone of importance in the shooting community. The morning qualification rounds proceeded smoothly for Sarah. She consistently placed shots in the center of targets at distances, ranging from 600 to 1,200 meters, earning respectful nods from nearby competitors and match officials. Her shooting technique was textbook perfect, with smooth bolt manipulation, consistent breathing patterns, and natural shooting positions that spoke of countless hours of practice. During the lunch break, Sarah was cleaning her rifle barrel when she heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, she saw the same man who had been watching her earlier. Up close, she could see the confidence in his eyes and the subtle signs of military bearing in his posture. A small patch on his shooting jacket identified him as a member of a special operations unit, though the specific details were discreet enough to avoid drawing attention. "Nice shooting this morning," the man said, his voice carrying a slight accent that Sarah couldn't immediately place. "I'm Marcus Chen. I've been watching your technique, and I have to say it's quite impressive for a civilian shooter." Sarah felt a mix of pride and caution at the compliment. She had learned to be wary of excessive praise, especially from strangers who might have ulterior motives. "Thank you," she replied simply, continuing to run the cleaning rod through her rifle barrel. "I've been working at it for a while." Marcus smiled, an expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. "A while? I'd say you've been working at it quite seriously. Your fundamentals are solid, your equipment choices are intelligent, and your shot placement is consistent. But I'm curious about something." Sarah looked up from her cleaning kit, sensing that this conversation was about to take an interesting turn. Around them, other competitors were eating lunch and discussing their morning performances, but Marcus seemed focused entirely on her. "What's the farthest shot you've ever made?" Marcus asked, his tone casual but his eyes intense. And I mean a real shot under field conditions, not just plinking at paper targets. The question caught Sarah slightly off guard. She had never discussed her private training sessions with anyone, not even her father who had taught her to shoot. The remote canyon where she practiced was her secret sanctuary, a place where she could push her limits without judgment or interference from others. That depends on how you define real conditions, Sarah replied carefully. I've taken game animals cleanly at distances most hunters would consider extreme, and I practice regularly at ranges that go well beyond what we're shooting today. Marcus nodded appreciatively, as if her answer confirmed something he had already suspected. I thought so. There's something about the way you read the wind and adjust for conditions that suggests you've spent serious time shooting at extended ranges. As they talked, Sarah learned that Marcus was not just any military shooter, but a graduate of one of the most elite sniper schools in the world. He had served multiple deployments in challenging environments where precise long-range shots meant the difference between mission success and failure. His casual mention of shots at distances exceeding 1,500 meters made Sarah realize she was speaking with someone whose skills were in an entirely different league from the typical competition shooter. The conversation continued as they walked back to the firing line for the afternoon sessions. Marcus shared stories about shooting in mountainous terrain, where thin air and unpredictable wind patterns created challenges that couldn't be replicated on any formal range. He described the mental pressure of taking shots where missing meant putting teammates at risk, a level of responsibility that civilian shooters rarely experienced. Sarah found herself both intimidated and inspired by Marcus's experience. His casual competence and understated confidence suggested capabilities that went far beyond what she had achieved in her private training sessions. Yet something in his manner indicated that he saw potential in her abilities, a recognition that both flattered and concerned her. As they reached their respective shooting positions, Marcus paused and looked directly at Sarah. The afternoon sun was creating shifting shadows across the range, and a gusty crosswind was beginning to pick up, conditions that would challenge even experienced shooters. You know, Sarah, Marcus said, using her name for the first time, I have a feeling this afternoon is going to be more interesting than either of us expected. The afternoon competition began with targets set at 1,400 meters, a distance that separated the serious precision shooters from the casual enthusiasts. Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly as she settled into her shooting position, not from nervousness, but from the focused excitement that always accompanied challenging shots. The wind had picked up since lunch, creating complex patterns across the range that would require careful reading and compensation. Sarah's first shot struck the target just outside the 10 ring, a result that would have satisfied most competitors, but fell short of her personal standards. She made a small adjustment to her scope and fired again, this time achieving a solid hit in the scoring area. As she continued through the string of fire, she became aware that Marcus was shooting with remarkable consistency, placing shot after shot in the center of his target despite the challenging conditions. Between shooting strings, Sarah observed Marcus's technique more carefully. His shooting position was unconventional compared to what she had learned from books and instructors, yet it appeared perfectly stable and repeatable. His breathing pattern was different too, with longer holds between breaths that allowed for more precise trigger control. Most notably, his scope adjustments were minimal and confident, suggesting an intuitive understanding of ballistics that came only from extensive real-world experience. As the afternoon progressed, the competition narrowed down to the final group of elite shooters. Sarah found herself in third place, a result that exceeded her expectations for her first major competition. Marcus had dominated the field, winning each stage with margins that demonstrated a clear superiority in skill and experience. His final group of shots at 1,400 meters had been clustered within an area smaller than what most shooters could achieve at half that distance. During the award ceremony, Sarah received her bronze medal with genuine pride. The recognition represented years of dedicated practice and significant personal investment in equipment and training. As she stood on the podium, she noticed Marcus watching her with an expression that seemed to combine approval with something else, perhaps calculation or evaluation. After the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Marcus approached Sarah near the parking area where she was loading her equipment into her truck. The evening air was cool and still, a stark contrast to the windy conditions they had shot in during the afternoon. "Congratulations on the medal," Marcus said, though his tone suggested this was a prelude to something more significant. "You should be proud of that performance, especially shooting against this level of competition." Sarah thanked him while securing her rifle case in the truck bed. She had noticed during the awards presentation that Marcus's trophy was accompanied by several other recognition items, including what appeared to be a check for a substantial monetary prize. The level of sponsorship and prize money suggested this competition was more significant than she had initially understood. "I have a proposition for you," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a more conversational level. "There's something I'd like to discuss, but it requires a level of discretion and seriousness that goes beyond typical shooting competition." The change in Marcus's tone immediately captured Sarah's attention. Throughout the day, he had maintained the casual confidence of an accomplished competitor, but now there was an intensity that suggested something much more serious was at stake. "I'm listening," Sarah replied, though a part of her wondered if she really wanted to hear what Marcus had to say. His military background and exceptional shooting skills suggested that his proposition might involve opportunities that could fundamentally change her life, for better or worse. Marcus glanced around the parking area to ensure they wouldn't be overheard, then continued. "There are shooting challenges that exist outside the world of formal competition, opportunities for shooters with exceptional skill to test themselves against standards that most people would consider impossible." Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The carefully neutral way Marcus described these challenges suggested they operated in a gray area between civilian sport and something more serious. Her forest ranger training had taught her to be cautious about situations that seemed too good to be true. "What kind of challenges?" Sarah asked, though she suspected the answer would be both fascinating and potentially dangerous. The level of secrecy Marcus was maintaining suggested activities that couldn't be discussed openly, which raised obvious questions about legality and safety. Instead of answering directly, Marcus asked a question that caught Sarah completely off guard. "What do you know about extreme long-range shooting?" "I'm talking about distances that go beyond anything attempted in civilian competition." Sarah had read about military and law enforcement shots at extreme distances, including several famous engagements where snipers had made successful hits at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The technical challenges involved in such shots were enormous, requiring not only exceptional marksmanship skills but also specialized equipment and extensive knowledge of advanced ballistics. "I know it's possible," Sarah replied carefully, "but I also know it requires capabilities and equipment that are beyond what most civilian shooters have access to." She paused, studying Marcus's expression. "Are you talking about something specific?" Marcus smiled, and for the first time that day the expression seemed genuinely warm rather than calculated. "I'm talking about a shot that has never been successfully completed by a civilian shooter. A shot that would establish a new benchmark for precision marksmanship and potentially open doors to opportunities you've never imagined." The parking area was nearly empty now, with only a few competitors remaining to finish loading their equipment. The setting sun was creating long shadows across the range, and the temperature was beginning to drop as evening approached. Sarah realized that this conversation was approaching a crucial decision point, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was being asked to decide. "The shot I have in mind," Marcus continued, "is at a distance of 327 meters, just over 2.25 miles. It's been attempted by military and civilian shooters, but never successfully completed under the conditions I'm proposing." Sarah's immediate reaction was disbelief. The distance Marcus had mentioned was beyond anything she had ever contemplated attempting. Her longest successful shots had been in the 2,000-meter range, achieved under carefully controlled conditions in her private canyon. The idea of nearly doubling that distance seemed not just challenging but potentially impossible. Sarah paused, trying to find appropriate words. "That's an extraordinary distance. The technical challenges would be enormous. Wind drift, bullet drop, equipment limitations, not to mention the skill required to make such a shot consistently." Marcus nodded approvingly at her analysis. "Exactly. Which is why it requires a shooter with exceptional natural ability, extensive training, and the mental strength to perform under pressure that most people can't imagine." As Sarah considered Marcus's proposal, she realized that her response would determine whether this conversation continued or ended. The cautious part of her mind was raising numerous red flags about the secrecy and potential risks involved. But another part of her, the part that had driven her to spend countless hours practicing in remote locations, was intrigued by the possibility of attempting something that had never been accomplished. Assuming such a shot were theoretically possible, Sarah said carefully, what would be involved? Where would it take place and under what conditions? Marcus's smile broadened, suggesting that her question indicated the kind of serious interest he had been hoping to generate. Those are excellent questions and they deserve detailed answers. But first I need to know if you're genuinely interested in exploring this possibility, or if you're just curious about the theoretical aspects. Sarah looked out across the now empty shooting range, thinking about the years of training and preparation that had led to this moment. The bronze medal in her gear bag represented a significant achievement, but Marcus was describing an opportunity that would dwarf anything she had accomplished or even imagined attempting. I'm interested, she said finally, but I need to understand exactly what I'd be getting into. 3 weeks after the competition, Sarah found herself driving through the Nevada desert toward coordinates Marcus had provided via encrypted message. The secrecy surrounding their arrangement had only intensified her curiosity and concern. Marcus had been clear that the training facility they would be using operated under special permissions that couldn't be discussed over conventional communication channels. The desert landscape was harsh and unforgiving, with rocky outcroppings and sparse vegetation extending to the horizon in all directions. Sarah's truck kicked up clouds of dust as she followed the increasingly rough dirt road toward what appeared to be an abandoned mining operation. The isolation was complete, with no signs of civilization visible in any direction. As she crested a small hill, Sarah saw a collection of buildings that looked far more sophisticated than the mining ruins she had expected. Several vehicles were parked near what appeared to be a main facility, and she could see equipment that suggested serious technological capabilities. A tall radio antenna and satellite dish indicated communication systems that went well beyond what would be needed for a simple training facility. Marcus emerged from the main building as Sarah parked her truck. His appearance was different from the competition 3 weeks earlier, with military-style clothing that looked more functional than fashionable. The casual confidence was still there, but overlaid with a seriousness that made clear this location was all business. Welcome to the Advanced Marksmanship Research Facility, Marcus said as Sarah gathered her equipment. This is where we separate theoretical knowledge from practical capability. The facility's interior was a fascinating combination of high-tech equipment and practical functionality. Computer workstations displayed ballistic calculation software that was far more sophisticated than anything Sarah had seen in civilian applications. Weather monitoring equipment provided real-time data on wind speed, direction, temperature, humidity, and atmospheric pressure. Most impressive was a shooting simulator that could replicate conditions at any location on Earth. Marcus introduced Sarah to the facility's other personnel, including Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a ballistics expert with advanced degrees in physics and engineering, and Chief Warrant Officer Mike Rodriguez, a retired military sniper instructor, whose experience included some of the longest confirmed kills in military history. The presence of such highly qualified personnel made clear that this was not a casual training program. Before we discuss attempting a shot at 3,127 meters, Dr. Walsh explained, we need to establish your current capabilities and identify areas where improvement is necessary. She gestured toward the computer workstation, displaying Sarah's competition results and other data that had apparently been collected without her knowledge. The evaluation process began with a comprehensive assessment of Sarah's shooting skills under controlled conditions. Using the facility's precision rifle system, which was several technological generations beyond her personal equipment, Sarah engaged targets at distances ranging from 1,000 to 2,500 meters. The results were both encouraging and humbling. At distances up to 1,800 meters, Sarah's performance was consistently excellent, with shot groups that impressed even the experienced instructors. However, as the range extended beyond 2,000 meters, her accuracy began to deteriorate significantly. The longer flight times and increased environmental effects at extreme ranges exposed limitations in her technique that hadn't been apparent at shorter distances. The good news, Chief Rodriguez explained after reviewing her performance data, is that your fundamental marksmanship skills are exceptionally solid. Your shooting position, trigger control, and follow-through are better than many military snipers I've worked with. Sarah felt encouraged by the praise, but she could sense that less positive feedback was coming. The challenging news, Rodriguez continued, is that shooting at 3,127 meters requires capabilities that go far beyond traditional marksmanship. You're going to need to learn new techniques for reading environmental conditions, making real-time ballistic calculations, and managing equipment that operates at the absolute limits of current technology. The training program that followed was unlike anything Sarah had previously experienced. Each day began with intensive study of advanced ballistics theory, including mathematical calculations that required her to relearn physics concepts she thought she had mastered in college. Dr. Walsh proved to be a demanding but patient instructor, explaining how factors like air density, Coriolis effect, and spin drift became critical variables at extreme ranges. Physical conditioning was another crucial component of the training. Chief Rodriguez explained that maintaining a stable shooting position for the extended time required for extreme long-range shots demanded fitness and endurance that most civilian shooters never developed. Sarah found herself doing exercises specifically designed to strengthen the muscle groups used in precision shooting positions. Equipment familiarization consumed hours each day. The rifle system designed for 3,127-meter shots was a custom-built precision instrument that cost more than Sarah's truck. Every component, from the specialized barrel in action to the advanced scope and range-finding equipment, represented the current state-of-the-art in long-range shooting technology. Learning to operate the system effectively required understanding capabilities and limitations that extended far beyond conventional sporting rifles. Weather reading became an obsession. At extreme ranges, small changes in wind speed or direction could cause misses measured in meters rather than inches. Sarah learned to interpret information from multiple weather monitoring stations, understanding how atmospheric conditions changed with altitude and distance. She practiced making rapid calculations that accounted for multiple variables simultaneously. The psychological aspects of extreme long-range shooting proved to be as challenging as the technical elements. At distances approaching 4,000 meters, the time between trigger pull and impact could exceed 5 seconds. Maintaining focus and commitment through such extended shot processes required mental discipline that Sarah had never previously developed. Marcus observed her training with careful attention, providing feedback that was always constructive but never entirely encouraging. His standards were clearly based on operational requirements rather than training goals, and Sarah began to understand that the shot he had proposed wasn't a theoretical exercise but something with serious practical implications. After 2 weeks of intensive training, Sarah attempted her first shot at 3,000 meters. The target was a precision steel plate designed to provide both visual and acoustic confirmation of hits. Her first attempt missed by what the spotting equipment estimated to be nearly 10 meters, a result that would have been satisfactory at shorter ranges but represented significant error at extreme distance. The miss was analyzed in detail using high-speed cameras and ballistic tracking. Equipment. Dr. Walsh identified several factors that had contributed to the error, including a slight miscalculation of wind drift and a small timing error in Sarah's trigger control. The precision required for success at extreme ranges was measured in fractions that seemed almost impossibly small. Sarah's second attempt at 3,000 meters was closer, but still unsuccessful. The third attempt struck the edge of the target, producing the distinctive ring that indicated a hit. The sense of accomplishment was enormous, but Marcus's reaction was more measured than celebratory. "That's good progress," he said, studying the target through a high-powered spotting scope. "But 3,000 meters is still 827 meters short of our objective. The additional distance represents challenges that are exponentially more difficult than what you just accomplished." As Sarah cleaned her rifle at the end of the training day, she reflected on how dramatically her understanding of precision shooting had expanded. The techniques and equipment she was learning to use represented capabilities she hadn't known existed just a few weeks earlier. Yet the ultimate goal of successfully engaging a target at 3,127 meters still seemed almost impossibly difficult. That evening, as she reviewed the day's performance data and prepared for the next day's training, Sarah realized that she was no longer the same person who had accepted Marcus's challenge 3 weeks earlier. The training was changing not just her shooting skills but her entire understanding of what human precision and dedication could accomplish. The question that remained was whether the changes would be sufficient to achieve something that no civilian shooter had ever accomplished. After a month of intensive training, Sarah had successfully engaged targets at distances up to 3,200 meters, though her consistency at such extreme ranges remained frustratingly variable. Some days she could achieve multiple hits on targets that seemed impossibly small and distant, while other days environmental conditions or minor technique variations would cause complete misses. The precision required was unlike anything in her previous shooting experience. It was during her 5th week at the facility that Marcus finally revealed the true purpose behind her training. Sarah had been wondering why such extensive resources were being invested in what appeared to be a purely academic exercise. The sophisticated equipment, expert instructors, and expensive ammunition suggested motivations that went far beyond establishing shooting records. The revelation came on a Thursday evening as Sarah was reviewing ballistic data from the day's training session. Marcus entered the analysis room and closed the door behind him, a gesture that had come to signal important conversations that required complete privacy. "Sarah," Marcus began, settling into a chair across from her workstation, "it's time you understood why we're really here." His tone was serious but not threatening, carrying the weight of someone about to share information that would change everything. Sarah had been expecting this conversation for weeks. The secrecy, the advanced equipment, and the presence of active military personnel had made clear that her training served purposes beyond personal development. "I'm ready to hear it," she replied, though part of her wondered if that was actually true. Marcus activated a secure communication device and projected a detailed topographical map onto the room's main display screen. The terrain shown was mountainous and remote, with elevation markings that indicated significant altitude variations. Sarah recognized the landscape as similar to regions she had worked in as a forest ranger, but the specific location was unfamiliar. 3 months ago, Marcus explained, a situation developed in this region that requires a precision engagement at a distance, and under conditions that exceed the capabilities of conventional military assets. He highlighted specific positions on the map with a laser pointer. The target is a communications facility that has been used to coordinate activities that pose significant threats to civilian populations. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as the implications became clear. Marcus wasn't talking about target practice or competition shooting. He was describing a mission that would require her to use her developing skills in a situation with real-world consequences. The facility is located on a ridge approximately 3,127 meters from the nearest position where a precision shooter can operate. Undetected, Marcus continued. The target itself is a specific piece of electronic equipment that must be disabled with a single, precisely placed shot. The map showed a complex arrangement of terrain features that would affect bullet trajectory and environmental conditions. Sarah could see why conventional military approaches would be problematic. The target location was protected by natural barriers that would prevent close approach, while its elevation and defensive positioning made it nearly impossible to engage using typical sniper tactics. Dr. Walsh entered the room and took a position near the display screen. "The ballistic challenges are extraordinary," she explained, manipulating the map to show wind patterns and atmospheric data. The shot would need to be taken across a valley where thermal conditions create unpredictable air currents, then climb nearly 800 meters in elevation before impacting the target. Sarah studied the tactical situation presented on the map. Her ranger training had included emergency response scenarios that required quick thinking and precise action under pressure, but nothing approaching the complexity of what Marcus was describing. "Why me?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew part of the answer. "Surely there are military snipers with more experience and proven capability at these distances." Marcus's expression became more serious. "There are, but they're all known to the opposition. This facility has been surveilling military personnel and would detect the approach of any conventional sniper team. We need someone with exceptional skill but no military profile. Someone who can access the shooting position without triggering the defensive measures that are in place." The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together in ways that both impressed and concerned Sarah. Her civilian background, which had seemed like a limitation in military contexts, was actually the key qualification for this particular mission. Her forest ranger training provided skills in wilderness movement and camouflage that would be essential for reaching the shooting position. Undetected, Chief Rodriguez joined the briefing and added tactical details that made the mission's complexity even more apparent. The shooting position is accessible only through a 3-day approach march across terrain that would challenge experienced mountaineers. You would need to carry all equipment and supplies while moving through areas where detection would compromise not just the mission but your personal safety. Sarah realized that accepting this mission would require her to make decisions that could affect the lives of people she would never meet, in situations she didn't fully understand. The weight of such responsibility was unlike anything in her previous experience. "I need to understand something," Sarah said after studying the briefing materials for several minutes. "You're asking me to take a shot that could have consequences I'm not qualified to evaluate, in a situation where the margin for error is essentially zero." Marcus nodded approvingly at her analysis. "That's exactly right. Which is why the decision to proceed must be entirely yours, made with complete understanding of what's involved." Dr. Walsh activated additional displays, showing detailed intelligence about the target facility and its activities. The information revealed a pattern of communications that had been linked to attacks on civilian targets, including schools and medical facilities. The precision required to disable the communications equipment without causing casualties represented a solution that could save lives while avoiding broader conflict. The shot itself would be taken at dawn, Marcus explained, when atmospheric conditions are most stable and thermal effects are minimized. You would have a window of approximately 30 minutes when conditions might be suitable for an attempt. Sarah absorbed the mission details while considering her personal capabilities and limitations. The training had proven that she could occasionally achieve hits at the required distance, but consistency remained a challenge. A single shot under field conditions with no opportunity for range adjustment or multiple attempts would test her skills at their absolute limits. "What happens if I miss?" Sarah asked. Though she suspected the answer would not be reassuring, Rodriguez provided the tactical assessment. Mission failure would mean the communications facility continues operating, and the attacks it coordinates would continue. Additionally, your position would likely be compromised, making extraction extremely difficult. The briefing continued for another hour, covering contingency plans, communication protocols, and extraction procedures. Sarah learned that her training at the Nevada facility had been designed specifically to prepare her for this mission, with every exercise and evaluation focused on the skills she would need in the actual operational environment. As the briefing concluded, Marcus asked the question that Sarah had been anticipating. "Based on everything you've learned about the mission and your own capabilities, are you willing to proceed?" Sarah looked at the maps and tactical data displayed around the room, considering everything she had learned about the situation and herself over the past month. The decision would commit her to actions that would fundamentally change her life. Regardless of whether the mission succeeded or failed, the forest ranger who had entered the Nevada facility 5 weeks earlier would never have imagined herself in this position. But the person she had become through intensive training and exposure to capabilities she hadn't known existed was capable of making decisions her previous self couldn't have contemplated. After several minutes of consideration, Sarah gave her answer, "I'll do it." 2 weeks after accepting the mission, Sarah found herself crouched in dense forest undergrowth at an altitude of nearly 8,000 feet, her breath forming small clouds in the pre-dawn darkness. The 3-day approach march had tested her physical conditioning and mental resilience in ways that even her forest ranger experience hadn't fully prepared her for. Every piece of equipment she carried had been selected for maximum functionality and minimum weight. But the specialized rifle system and supporting gear still created a load that made each step a deliberate effort. The final day's movement had been the most challenging, requiring her to traverse terrain that was barely passable, while remaining completely undetected by the sophisticated surveillance systems protecting the target facility. Electronic warfare specialists had provided her with equipment that could identify and avoid motion sensors and thermal imaging devices, but the technology required constant attention and significantly slowed her progress. Marcus had accompanied her for the first 2 days of the approach, providing tactical guidance and helping navigate the most difficult sections of the route. His presence had been reassuring, but also served as a reminder of the mission's serious nature. When he departed at the final waypoint, leaving her to complete the approach alone, Sarah felt the full weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. The shooting position she had reached before dawn was a natural rock formation that provided both concealment and a stable platform for the precision rifle system. The location had been selected using satellite imagery and confirmed through reconnaissance that revealed optimal ballistic conditions and minimal exposure to detection systems. Sarah had practiced setting up the position during training, but doing so in darkness while managing the stress of an actual mission added complexity she hadn't fully anticipated. As she assembled the rifle system and positioned the supporting equipment, Sarah reviewed the mission timeline that would determine her success or failure. Weather reconnaissance had identified a 30-minute window beginning at sunrise, when atmospheric conditions would be most favorable for the extreme range shot. The timing was critical because thermal heating after sunrise would create air currents that would make accurate shooting impossible. The target itself was barely visible even through the powerful spotting scope, appearing as a small geometric shape against the distant ridgeline. At 3,027 meters, the communications antenna Sarah needed to disable looked impossibly small and remote. The precision required to hit such a target under field conditions represented the absolute limits of current technology and human capability. Sarah began her pre-shot routine 45 minutes before the planned engagement time, following procedures that had been refined through countless repetitions during training. Every action was deliberate and methodical, designed to eliminate variables that could affect accuracy. She checked and rechecked equipment settings, verified range calculations, and monitored environmental conditions using instruments that provided real-time data on factors affecting bullet trajectory. The ballistic solution for the shot was staggering in its complexity. At nearly 4 kilometers, the bullet would be affected by wind conditions at multiple altitudes, temperature variations along its flight path, and atmospheric density changes caused by the elevation difference between her position and the target. The calculations required to account for these variables filled several pages of specialized data sheets. Wind reading became an obsession as Sarah monitored conditions across the valley separating her position from the target. Using multiple instruments and visual indicators, she tracked wind speed and direction at various distances, looking for the stable patterns that would allow an accurate shot. The consistency she needed was measured in seconds, making timing as critical as marksmanship technique. As the sun began to rise behind the distant mountains, Sarah noticed the atmospheric conditions beginning to change in ways that matched the predictions from her training. The thermal inversion that had created stable air during the night was starting to break down, but for a brief period, the conditions would be as favorable as they were likely to get. Sarah settled into her final shooting position 20 minutes before the planned shot time, allowing her body to adapt to the position and her breathing to stabilize. The weight of the rifle, the pressure of the cheek rest, and the resistance of the trigger all needed to feel completely natural before she could attempt the shot that represented months of preparation and training. Through the high-powered scope, the target area became clearly defined, though the specific antenna she needed to hit remained difficult to distinguish from surrounding equipment. Sarah had memorized the target's exact location relative to other visible landmarks, but identifying it through the scope under actual shooting conditions required focus and patience that tested her mental discipline. The first atmospheric condition check indicated that wind speeds were within acceptable parameters, though air currents in the valley remained variable. Sarah continued monitoring environmental data while maintaining her shooting position, waiting for the window of stability that her training had taught her to recognize. At 7 minutes before the planned shot time, Sarah observed the wind patterns settling into the stable configuration she had been waiting for. The thermal effects were minimal, atmospheric pressure was steady, and visibility was excellent. All the technical conditions were as favorable as they were likely to become. Sarah began her final breathing sequence, following the precise pattern that had become automatic through months of training. Her heart rate slowed to its resting level, her muscle tension relaxed to the optimal state for precision shooting, and her focus narrowed to include only the essential elements of sight picture, trigger control, and follow-through. Through the scope, the target antenna appeared clear and well-defined against the morning sky. Sarah made final adjustments to her point of aim, accounting for the last-minute environmental readings and the ballistic solution that would guide the bullet across nearly 4 kilometers of varied terrain. The pressure on the trigger increased gradually as Sarah applied the smooth, consistent force that had been drilled into her muscle memory through thousands of practice repetitions. The crosshairs remained steady on the target as she reached the final stage of trigger control, the point where the slightest additional pressure would release the shot. Time seemed to slow as Sarah's finger completed the trigger press. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder with the familiar push that she had learned to manage without disturbing her sight picture. Through the scope, she maintained focus on the target area, though at this extreme distance, the bullet's flight time would be over 5 seconds. The sound of the shot echoed across the valley, a sharp crack that seemed impossibly loud in the morning stillness. Sarah immediately began counting the seconds while maintaining her shooting position, knowing that movement too soon could prevent her from observing the shot's impact and confirming whether the mission had succeeded. 3 seconds passed with no visible change at the target location. At 4 seconds, Sarah began to wonder if her shot had missed entirely, a possibility that would mean mission failure and the need for immediate extraction. At 5.5 seconds, she saw a small flash of light from the target area, followed by what appeared to be sparks or debris falling from the antenna structure. Through the spotting scope, Sarah could see that the communications antenna had been severed near its base exactly as planned. The precision shot had achieved its objective, disabling the facility's primary communication capability without causing casualties or broader damage. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming, but Sarah forced herself to maintain focus on the immediate tasks required for successful mission completion. She quickly began breaking down her equipment and preparing for extraction, following procedures that had been rehearsed until they became automatic. Every piece of gear needed to be secured and packed in a specific sequence that would allow rapid movement while leaving no trace of her presence at the shooting position. As Sarah began her withdrawal from the target area, she reflected on the transformation she had undergone over the past 2 months. The forest ranger who had attended a shooting competition in Montana would never have imagined herself capable of achieving what she had just accomplished. The technical skills, physical conditioning, and mental discipline required for the mission had pushed her far beyond her previous limitations. The extraction route led through different terrain than her approach march, following paths designed to avoid detection systems that might have been activated by the successful shot. Sarah moved quickly but carefully, knowing that her safety depended on reaching the extraction point before opposition forces could organize a response to the antenna's destruction. The communications equipment she carried allowed her to transmit a brief coded message confirming mission success. Marcus's voice came through her earpiece with congratulations and updated extraction instructions, his relief evident even through the encrypted channel. The mission that had seemed impossibly difficult just hours earlier was now approaching successful completion. As Sarah made her way through the mountain terrain toward the extraction point, she began to understand that this mission represented only the beginning of a new phase in her life. The capabilities she had developed and demonstrated would open doors to opportunities she had never imagined. In a world where precision and dedication were valued above conventional qualifications, the shot that had begun as a seemingly impossible challenge had become proof that human potential, properly developed and applied, could achieve results that seemed to defy the laws of physics and probability. Sarah Martinez was no longer just an exceptional marksman, but someone whose skills could make a difference in situations where conventional solutions were inadequate. The extraction point was located 12 kilometers from Sarah's shooting position, requiring her to traverse challenging mountain terrain while carrying the disassembled rifle system and supporting equipment. The route had been carefully planned to avoid populated areas and known surveillance positions, but the distance and elevation changes made for an exhausting journey that tested her physical conditioning to its limits. Sarah maintained a steady pace through the morning, using navigation techniques learned during her forest ranger training, combined with GPS coordinates provided through her secure communication system. The mountain environment was both beautiful and treacherous, with loose rock surfaces and steep gradients that required constant attention to avoid injury that could compromise the extraction. As she moved through the wilderness, Sarah began to process the magnitude of what she had accomplished. The successful shot at 3,027 meters represented not just a personal achievement, but a demonstration of capabilities that very few people in the world possessed. The precision required and the pressure of real-world consequences had tested every aspect of her training and preparation. The psychological impact of the mission was beginning to register as the immediate stress of execution gave way to broader reflection. Sarah had used her skills to disable equipment that was being used to coordinate attacks on civilian targets, potentially saving lives while avoiding the casualties that would have resulted from more conventional military responses. The responsibility she had accepted and successfully fulfilled was unlike anything in her previous experience. Communication with the extraction team confirmed that the antenna's destruction had achieved its intended effect. Intelligence reports indicated that the facility's communication capabilities had been completely severed, disrupting coordination networks that had been operating for months. The precision of the shot had prevented collateral damage while achieving the mission's strategic objectives. As Sarah approached the extraction coordinates, she could see the helicopter landing zone that had been prepared in a remote valley. The timing was critical because the aircraft would be vulnerable during landing and takeoff, requiring her to arrive within a narrow window that allowed minimal exposure to potential threats. The extraction team consisted of the same personnel who had provided her training at the Nevada facility, with Marcus coordinating the operation and Chief Rodriguez providing tactical security. Their presence was reassuring, but Sarah realized that their professional interest in her performance extended beyond this single mission. During the helicopter flight back to the staging area, Marcus briefed Sarah on the intelligence results that had already begun flowing from the mission's success. The communications disruption had exposed the facility's backup systems and revealed information about broader networks that intelligence agencies had been unable to penetrate using conventional methods. "What you accomplished today," Marcus explained over the aircraft's communication system, "demonstrates capabilities that could be extremely valuable in similar situations. This wasn't just a one-time mission, but a proof of concept that opens up possibilities we've been discussing for years." Sarah understood that Marcus was describing potential future missions that would require the same combination of extreme marksmanship skills and operational security that had made her successful today. The prospect was both exciting and daunting, representing career opportunities that were completely outside her previous life experience. The debriefing process that followed the extraction lasted for several days and covered every aspect of the mission, from initial planning through final execution. Sarah provided detailed analysis of her equipment performance, environmental conditions, and tactical challenges that would inform future operations. Her feedback was treated with the same seriousness as reports from experienced military operators. Dr. Walsh was particularly interested in the ballistic data from the successful shot, including precise measurements of environmental conditions and bullet performance at extreme range. The information would contribute to ongoing research into the limits of precision marksmanship and the development of equipment systems for future long-range engagements. The financial compensation for the mission was substantial, far exceeding what Sarah could have earned in years of forest ranger work. More importantly, she was offered opportunities for additional training and potential future missions that would allow her to continue developing her capabilities while contributing to operations that served broader security interests. As the formal debriefing concluded, Sarah faced decisions about her future that were both unprecedented and unavoidable. Her success on the mission had proven that she possessed rare capabilities that were valuable to organizations operating at the highest levels of government and international security. The question was whether she wanted to pursue opportunities that would fundamentally change her life direction. Marcus presented her with options that ranged from occasional consulting assignments to full-time positions with organizations she had never heard of, but that clearly operated with significant resources and authority. Each possibility offered different levels of commitment and different types of challenges, but all would require her to leave behind the relatively simple life she had known as a forest ranger. The transformation that had begun with a casual conversation at a shooting competition had led to achievements that proved human potential could exceed what most people considered possible. Sarah's successful shot at 3.827 meters had established a new benchmark for civilian marksmanship, while solving a real-world problem that had resisted conventional solutions. As she considered her options, Sarah realized that her decision would be based not just on personal interests, but on her understanding of how her unique skills could be used to make a positive difference in situations where precision and discretion were essential. The shot that had seemed impossible just months earlier had become evidence that extraordinary challenges could be met with adequate preparation, proper equipment, and unwavering determination. The forest ranger who had accepted Marcus's challenge no longer existed. In her place was someone whose capabilities had been proven under the most demanding conditions possible, someone whose future would be shaped by opportunities that existed far beyond the conventional boundaries of civilian life. Sarah Martinez had become one of the very few people in the world who could reliably achieve the impossible when the stakes demanded nothing less than perfection. The smirk that Marcus had worn when he first asked if she thought she could handle 3,827 meters now seemed like recognition of potential rather than skepticism about her abilities. The challenge that had seemed impossibly difficult had become the foundation for a completely new understanding of what she could accomplish when properly motivated and supported. 6 months after the successful mission, Sarah found herself standing on a different mountain range, this time as an instructor at an advanced training facility that prepared civilians and military personnel for extreme precision shooting challenges. The facility, hidden in the Colorado Rockies, served as a center for developing capabilities that conventional military training couldn't provide. Her role had evolved from student to teacher, sharing the hard-won knowledge and techniques that had enabled her historic shot. The students who came to learn from her included military snipers seeking to extend their range capabilities, law enforcement officers preparing for challenging urban environments, and carefully selected civilians whose backgrounds suggested potential for exceptional achievement. The teaching experience had revealed aspects of marksmanship that Sarah hadn't fully understood during her own training. Breaking down complex techniques into teachable components required her to analyze every element of her shooting process, from equipment setup through post-shot procedures. Her students benefited from instruction based on recent real-world experience, rather than purely theoretical knowledge. Marcus had become both a colleague and a mentor, coordinating between Sarah's training responsibilities and opportunities for operational missions that required her unique capabilities. The organization they worked for remained deliberately obscure, operating through various government agencies and international partnerships that maintained necessary secrecy while providing substantial resources. The financial rewards of her new career had allowed Sarah to acquire equipment and training opportunities that were completely beyond her previous means. Her personal rifle collection now included systems worth more than her former annual salary, each optimized for specific types of extreme range challenges. The investment in equipment was matched by ongoing training that kept her skills at their peak. The psychological adjustments to her new life had been more challenging than the technical aspects. Sarah had needed to develop comfort with secrecy and discretion that were foreign to her previous experience as a forest ranger. Learning to live with classified information and restricted communication had required adaptations that affected her relationships with family and former colleagues. Her parents knew that she had left Forest Service for private security work that involved extensive travel, but the details of her actual activities remained necessarily vague. The cover story was close enough to reality to be sustainable while protecting information that needed to remain classified. The isolation that came with her new career was offset by relationships with colleagues who understood the unique demands of their work. Training new students had become one of the most rewarding aspects of Sarah's new role. She had developed instructional methods that accelerated the learning process while maintaining the safety standards essential for extreme range shooting. Her students achieved proficiency levels that would have taken years to develop using conventional training approaches. The most promising students were occasionally recruited for missions similar to the one that had launched Sarah's career. She had been involved in the selection and preparation of 3 individuals who successfully completed precision shooting challenges that contributed to important operational objectives. The sense of contributing to something larger than personal achievement had become a driving motivation. International recognition of Sarah's capabilities had led to consulting opportunities with allied military forces, seeking to develop their own extreme-range shooting programs. Her expertise was particularly valued because it was based on proven real-world success rather than purely theoretical knowledge. The consulting work provided opportunities to travel and learn from marksmen with different backgrounds and perspectives. The technical challenges of extreme-range shooting continued to evolve as new equipment and techniques became available. Sarah remained at the forefront of these developments, participating in research projects that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. Her input was sought by equipment manufacturers developing the next generation of precision shooting systems. A year after her first mission, Sarah received an opportunity that would test her capabilities in ways that exceeded even her historic 3,827-meter shot. Intelligence agencies had identified a target that required engagement at a range approaching 4,500 meters, under conditions that would challenge every aspect of her training and experience. The new mission would require her to apply everything she had learned while adapting to conditions that no one had previously attempted to address. The target was located in terrain that presented ballistic challenges beyond anything in her previous experience, with environmental factors that would test the limits of current equipment and technique. Sarah's decision to accept the new challenge was based on confidence earned through proven success and ongoing development of her capabilities. The scared forest ranger who had hesitantly accepted Marcus's original challenge had been replaced by someone whose skills were recognized as exceptional by organizations operating at the highest levels of international security. The transformation that had begun with a seemingly casual conversation at a shooting competition had led to a career that exceeded anything Sarah had previously imagined possible. Her willingness to attempt something that seemed impossible had opened doors to opportunities that existed far beyond conventional boundaries. As Sarah prepared for her next mission, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The combination of natural ability, intensive training, and willingness to accept extraordinary challenges had created capabilities that served purposes beyond personal achievement. Her success had proven that human potential, properly developed and applied, could overcome limitations that most people accepted as absolute. The smirk that Marcus had displayed when asking if she could handle 3,927 meters now seemed like recognition of something he had seen in her performance that she hadn't yet recognized in herself. The challenge that had seemed impossibly difficult had become the foundation for achievements that continued to exceed expectations. Sarah Martinez had become living proof that the right person, properly trained and adequately motivated, could achieve results that seemed to defy the laws of physics and probability. Her story would inspire future generations of precision shooters while remaining largely unknown to the general public. A testament to capabilities that existed in the shadows where exceptional individuals served purposes that conventional solutions couldn't address. The woman who had once simply been tuning her rifle had become someone whose skills could change the outcome of situations where precision meant the difference between success and failure, between life and death, between chaos and order. Her journey from forest ranger to world-class precision shooter proved that extraordinary potential often lay hidden behind ordinary circumstances, waiting for the right challenge to reveal capabilities that no one had imagined possible.